Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the long-lost collaborative LP from Serj Tankian and Jimmy Urine. That's right, two of the most unique, celebrated, and provocative singers, performers, and songwriters of 2000s rock and heavy metal have united on this record, Fuktronic, the result of a long-awaited multimedia project and collaboration that spans back nearly 8 years. That's right, this wasn't just to be an album, this was to be a story, dare I say even a new franchise from Serj Tankian and Jimmy Urine, one that would include a mobile app, a graphic novel, and potentially even a feature film, seeing as how the album itself was marketed as the soundtrack to an unreleased, purely hypothetical British gangster film. Will we ever see that app, that graphic novel, that movie? I honestly don't know, but if I were a gambling man, I'd say probably not. I mean, it's been nearly a decade. We have no idea how much progress has been made in that time, and unless this album turns out to be a gigantic hit, I highly doubt any more progress would be made, especially not immediately, considering, global pandemic, which has brought everything to a screeching fucking halt worldwide. But hey, at least we have this album, this glimpse of the grand British gangster vision that Jimmy Urine and Serj Tankian concocted together. Two men that had made their careers off of making incredibly provocative, controversial, and poignant music, often to the dismay and genuine offense of many people out there. And that alone, regardless of your opinions on either of these artists and their respective works, should be somewhat interesting. Yes? Right? Well, I guess I gotta be the bad guy and officially start this review and say no. Fuktronic was not worth the wait. On paper, there's a lot of stuff here that's interesting. Serj and Jimmy are straying away from some of their usual influences, adopting more of an electronic and dance kind of vibe, adopting influences from instrumental hip-hop, contemporary 90s, early 2000s alternative rock, with a lot of voiceover as well, almost as if the album is playing out more like an audio play rather than a traditional album or even a soundtrack as it's been billed as. And just the general talent, the charisma, the aura that these people consistently bring to the table should be enough to create something really kind of unique. I mean, I've always greatly appreciated everything Serj has done, not just with System of a Down, but also as a solo artist. And while I'm not the biggest fan of Mindless self-indulgence, I'll happily admit that Jimmy has a totally unfuckable attitude and punk rock energy. One that I feel I haven't seen in punk rock since its glory days. I would go as far as to say that Jimmy Urine, as far as his attitude, as far as his presentation is concerned, is kind of like this weird modern cyberpunk interpretation of Johnny Rotten. And yet, this album, despite its vision, despite its intentions, despite all of the spices and flavors that these people should be able to bring into the mix, and to some extent do, feels so dry, so tepid, so lame, so uninspired. A lot of the beats and rhythms here feel very repetitive, very derivative, almost like something ripped out of an old video game. I was specifically reminded of Jet Set Radio, a lot of the more modern 8-bit style platforming games, and in some of the album's weird alternative rock inspired flows, even some of the filler music found in the Silent Hill games, specifically 2 and 3. It almost feels as if Jimmy and Serj were so busy trying to shape the vision of this multimedia franchise that they forgot to really work much on the album. They forgot, essentially, to create the soundtrack for this hypothetical movie. And if I'm right, it's especially strange because this movie, this story, at least based on the information that Fuktronic is giving me, isn't really all that special. From what I understand, this is supposed to be about a young British gangster who's having trouble adjusting to life outside of prison, but none of this is effectively communicated throughout this album. And what is actually communicated on this record is done so through onslaughts of incredibly sexist and offensive slurs and extreme non-stop, almost South Park-esque vulgarity. Like, I don't think there's a single sentence on this record that does not contain one or more of the following words: pussy, cunt, bitch, or fuck. I understand that in the context of this genre, there's going to be some extreme vulgarity, especially from someone like Jimmy Urine, but so much of this feels completely unnecessary and prevents any actual, real, useful information from being expressed. To the point where Fuktronic sounds less like an edgy R-rated British gangster film and more like a child displaying his new favorite curse words over Xbox Live. An analogy that, may I add, comes dangerously close to reality on the track Guns, in which our main character, our hero if you will, is shown screaming his ass off over the phone in a conversation with a gentleman who I have to assume, based on his accent, is Indian or Pakistani, but at the very least, a person of color. Like, seriously, if that alone doesn't sound like the kind of shenanigans you'd find on Xbox Live, then you clearly have never been on Xbox Live. And if that little bit of questionable and genuinely offensive cringe wasn't enough for you, then the following track, Ladies, is sure to make many people happy, as it features again our main character, our hero if you will, basically just expressing how good he feels during a blowjob. I mean, at no point does he say he's getting a blowjob, but he does say things along the lines of, fuck, oh yeah, that's good, keep doing that. All the while some sensual jazzy trumpet plays in the background, and there's a lot of feminine moaning, like, and ah. Doesn't exactly sound like he's mowing the lawn, to say the least. But wait, there's more, because it gets even more uncomfortable thanks to lines like, I will slit your fucking throat, which our main character directs at someone that I'm assuming is either in the room with him or is the woman giving him said blowjob. Granted, I don't actually really know, and this might be the one good thing about this album not being very good at communicating the fucking story, but the fact that I even have to sit here and think about that possibility is itself really fucked up. Almost objectively, the tracks that focus less on scripted dialogue and more on the actual instrumental music do tend to do a lot better, and I'll admit that I do find myself bopping my head to some tracks like TTFO, Russian, Kit Kat Club. Credits in particular I thought was pretty enjoying. It reminded me of the old school aesthetic of Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future. But I wouldn't consider any of this high praise, as in the case of those former 3 tracks, you could just as easily throw them on to a lo-fi hip-hop or synth playlist and they would bleed into oblivion. I'm unfortunately going to give this a 1.5 out of 5. This album, this vision, this idea of Fuktronic was just not worth the wait. It's not so much that the story and vision is underdeveloped, it's flat out unfinished, and what has been finished amounts to nothing more than a wall of never-ending vulgarity and bullshit, supported by a series of beats and rhythms that just feel so vanilla, so bland, so tame, so competent, but nothing else. Like, seriously, it took 8 years for Jimmy Urine and Serj Tankian to create an album that does not deliver a single moment that could not be recreated in real life by simply playing some shitty instrumental hip-hop and trying to talk fucking smack to a bunch of 12-year-olds in front of a McDonald's. I feel especially bad for Serj here, as none of the artistry and intelligence that he regularly displays in his music has been implemented into Fuktronic, at least not noticeably so. In fact, now that I think about it, this feels very much more in line with the work of Jimmy Urine, to the point where if I just added some louder synths, metallic guitars, and, well, let's be honest, even more slurs, nobody would question if it was relabeled as a Mindless Self-Indulgence record. I guess with that in mind, if you are familiar with Mindless Self-Indulgence's particular brand of lol, random, hardcore, glitchy pop punk, then maybe you'll be able to get a little bit more out of this than I did. But even then, I still think you'd be better off just listening to a Mindless Self-Indulgence record. I mean, they're not my cup of tea, but I definitely think there's a lot more going on in any one of their respective records than there is on Fuktronic. I have absolutely no idea why this project took as long as it did, but I do know that after hearing this album, I don't want to see that mobile app, I don't want to see that graphic novel, I don't want to see that theoretical movie, and frankly, I'm not really sure I want these two to collaborate again. I'd even go as far as to say that this is probably one of the most disappointing and unappealing collaborations I've really heard in a long, long time. 1.5 out of 5, just a fucking bad record. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.